Hi there, welcome to the KBVC VC viewers. And you're like, oh, it's a video collection viewers. We're not book collection viewers. What's going on with the title of this video? It says book review. And I do reading also. I collect movies and I also collect books about movies. And I thought I would go ahead and do some book reviews. One of my favorite directors of all time, if you don't know by now, and if everything goes according to plan, is also his birthday today, Mr. Alfred Hitchcock. Good evening. And the book we're reviewing is HitchcockTruffaut, The Definitive Study of Alfred Hitchcock by François Truffaut. Hopefully I'm pronouncing all of those words correctly. And names. Now, I don't know for sure, because this is actually the first written book I've read about Hitchcock and his work. It is my understanding that some of them are not very favorable towards Hitchcock, who is one of my favorite directors. I don't know if he's a good person. I don't think he's a horrible person. I just think he's a person who doesn't really care about people's feelings, which nowadays is a horrible thing. That's kind of hypocritical because millions of people don't care about millions of other people's feelings. All he cared about were the movies, which is very evident in this book, HitchcockTruffaut. Now, how did I come about picking this one? Well, for the last decade, is that what? 2012. So for the last 10 years, myself and the missus have been slowly making our way through the masterpiece collection, the Alfred Hitchcock from Universal Studios. Limited edition, but I don't think that number on the bottom, I think that's just the print number. I don't think there's a limit number. There's not a, like 5,000 out of 5,000 or whatever, It's not one of those. Like limited, they mean, oh, we only made 3 million, which I don't know if true or not. Anyway, been making our way through it. Almost there. We've got 1.5 movies left to watch. But this isn't one of them. We were watching this movie right here, Topaz. And even though it has shows you where Alfred Hitchcock is, for those of you who don't know, one of the things he's most famous for is actually doing a cameo. We say cameo, but it's a blink and you'll miss us. He's in the background somewhere. He always likes to throw himself. Who started off as a thing and then just kind of became a good luck charm for him, and so we can just continue doing it. It's the Twilight Zone? No, it's Alfred Hitchcock, the Master of Suspense. Would anyone believe that he wasn't necessarily considered the Master of Suspense? That there was a time when he was considered, a hack is too strong of a word, but basically there were a lot of imitators of his, not necessarily his style, but his, what you might consider your typical Alfred Hitchcock movie. And really this set really does have like all the movies you would want to watch of Alfred Hitchcock's. I mean, there's some, I'm sorry, I say that. There's some other good ones. They're all good ones. But I'm digressing. What I'm here to talk about is the book. Anyway, in Topaz, the final scene of the movie has two people walking past the, or maybe they're sitting on a park bench. What has the other people walk past? I don't remember. But one is a short, fat guy, and the other is a tall, lanky guy. And I said to myself, this was about the time that they did this book. Was that actually a second cameo of Hitchcock and Truffaut discussing movies as they walked by? So I was like very intrigued, and so I got the book to find out. And I figured I could listen to some film historian who has basically the same pedigree of film knowledge as I do talk about Hitchcock, or I can hear Hitchcock talk about Hitchcock, or Truffaut to talk about Hitchcock. I mean, Hitchcock, because of his TV shows, because of his movies, through the 60s and before was legend by the time I was a kid. Or, everything was like, ooh, you want to watch something scary? You watch a Hitchcock. That's what people say. That's what people say, don't they? And Truffaut, I only knew as the one French scientist from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Didn't know he was a director. Well, I became aware that he was a director, and that's why Spielberg put him in the movie, I think. Actually, I don't remember why Spielberg put him in the movie, because he loved his work. As a director, I believe, I could be wrong, this isn't about Close Encounters of the Third Kind or Spielberg. This is about Hitchcock. That's the wrong way around. Hitchcock. That's all I'm going to say about Hitchcock. No, that's not all I got to say about Hitchcock. So let me tell you more about Hitchcock. Okay. So I picked up this book at Amazon because there are no local booksellers. But if you have a local bookseller, even if it's like a Barnes & Noble, I would pick it up there. Why? Because even chains like Barnes & Noble need help, believe it or not. But if you've got a local bookstore or a used bookstore close by, go to them first. Revised edition, which I was kind of like, oh, well, why do I want the revised edition? I want the original edition, and I want some extra tacked on stuff. But the revised edition is still from the early days. It was just, I believe, after Hitchcock passed away, Truffaut added some more stuff, so that's why it's the revised edition. I did read this book, and I took some awesome notes. See all those highlighted? I didn't. It's all in the brain. So that's why you're getting the video that you're getting. HitchcockTruffaut. You don't need my eyes. What are you talking about? Bookdepository.com. So, technically, I guess I did buy it. Small businesses always, they go through Amazon. It's all across the world. Just because you're buying it on Amazon doesn't mean you're not buying it from somebody. Small, just not local. I'm digressing about books, and I'm supposed to be talking about this book right here, Hitchcock and Truffaut. Truffaut had already directed several movies at this point. Hitchcock had already directed up to Torn Curtain, at least, I think. Well, like I said, it was around the Topaz time. They talk about the end of Topaz and stuff. So they start off right at the beginning. Hitchcock is a young boy, very famous, often told story, either often told by him or other people, academics, YouTubers, about how when he was a young boy, his father sent him to a local constabulary, police office, precinct, and said, hey, could you lock up my son for about an hour, whatever it was. So they're like, okay. They lock him up in their holding cell for about an hour and let him go. And that gave him a horrible fear of the police, which is shown throughout all of his movies. And that's why that's one of the major tales that he tells that gets retold about him. And it does a nice job. This book does a nice job of going through each and every movie. And it starts back when he was not a director, but doing before there was sound, there were silent films. And they had words to read whenever there was dialogue that needed to be given that was felt important for the audience to know. And he was the guy who would write it out, and he would do a little illustration. Talk about flowers, it'd be little flowers kind of thing. I don't know. But that was the gist of it. Okay, I'm just going to put him right there. And then that way he's like pointing at even though he's blurry, he's going to be pointing at depending on how you're watching this, he'll be pointing at the commenters down below. Look at that comment. Good evening. I find his comment very wry. I don't do very good Hitchcock, especially when I haven't heard him in over. Sean Connery. Everyone British is Sean Connery. Been a while. I mean, no, that's not true. I watched some for my birthday movies. And because Hitchcock was known, was known as being a very, having very dry humor and often wanting to not give serious answers to interviewers. I don't know if it was the kind of thing where he was like, well, these guys don't know what the heck they're talking about, so I'm just going to lay traps for them to fall into. The only thing I can think of at the moment is the Dick Cavett show. I think I said that right, Dick Cavett. I find Dick Cavett to be, I don't know, I'd say a little bit of a wet blanket or something. He out of his depth, and I feel like I'm being like really mean when I say that. It sounds very mean. That's not a compliment, but the guy was, he had a long interview series, and he interviewed lots of people. He had the great honor of interviewing tons of actors, artists, directors from the golden age of Hollywood, like Mr. Hitchcock. And so the example I have of how Hitchcock would give viewers interviews, he had kind of just run Dick Cavett in a little bit of a circle kind of thing, talking circles around him. And Mr. Cavett, I hope I'm saying his last name right. He can feel free to something. I believe he's passed away. By the time I get this video posted anyway, that's how long it takes me, folks. I could be passed away. I'm not, hopefully. Don't know why I just jinxed myself there. You're now in an episode of The Ring. An episode of The Ring? Yes, it was a TV series. Was it a TV series? No, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm from a parallel universe. Anyway, did I mention it's like 80 degrees in here and the AC is on and fans are going, and I'm sorry if that's noisy. I don't care. In the refrigerator, because I'm right by the kitchen. The refrigerator's running. Anyway, where was I? Dick Cavett says to Mr. Hitchcock, "You have an odd sense of humor, don't you?" And Hitchcock's reply was like, oh, "I'm sorry, what do you mean? Like 1, 3, 5, 7?" And I think like Dick Cavett kind of got it, but didn't necessarily really get it at the time. Maybe you yourself are saying, "I don't get it." And that's okay that you don't get it. It's okay that Dick Cavett didn't get it. But that was the kind of interviewer that this guy was basically always trying to take the mickey. He wasn't always trying, but he would be happy to take the mickey out on people. He was also a big practical joker. They talk a lot about that in the book. And so the fact why this book is considered the definitive interview of Alfred Hitchcock was the fact that he was just sitting down and talking to a fellow director rather than some interviewer that he didn't think would grasp the art form of his movies. Now, I wasn't aware of this before I read the book, but Truffaut, before he was director, was a interviewer or a newspaper writer for a movie magazine in France. And I actually met Hitchcock before. There was a very funny story of the first time him and his friend tried to interview Hitchcock. I'm not going to spoil it here. So because they have that understanding of from director to director, and that Hitchcock had seen Truffaut's films, so he kind of knew what was going on, and he could say something about what was going on in his films. He was able to give like basically straightforward answers. He was always kind of a little cheeky fellow. I mean, look at those things. I could do it if I didn't have the beard. What? The beard is hiding something? No. So I would say this would be the most frank of any interview that you would have ever gotten from Hitchcock. I could be wrong. There might be others out there. I don't know. But this is what I chose to read, and this is what we're talking about. One thing about this book, there's probably a couple things that don't age about this book. One thing that may seem strange to a modern reader is that Truffaut's main mission in this book is to talk about what a great director Alfred Hitchcock is. Because at this time that this book was written and made, Hitchcock was mainstream. The modern equivalent, I'll say Spielberg. People often forget how, well, I don't think nowadays people don't necessarily forget how good Steven Spielberg movies used to be. They're still really good. I enjoyed West Side Story, The Post, and I can't remember. Ready Player One was okay, but it's that kind of thing where a director style has become so ingrained and mimicked by others in television or movies or what have you, that it seems to become passé, bland, not as great as it once used to be. That's kind of like, another example would be, people really like Hitchcock movies. It's kind of the snooty people nowadays saying, people really like Marvel movies. They must not be very good. They're just popcorn, populist movies and with no artistic value whatsoever. That's kind of what people were saying about Hitchcock films. I like Marvel movies. I would say they're very consistently good across the board. Just like Spielberg's movies are very good across the board, and Alfred Hitchcock movies are very good across the board. The only difference is that when a Hitchcock movie is super good, it is better than both combined. You took a Marvel and Spielberg and put them together, you wouldn't be able to get a Vertigo. You might get Vertigo because of all the moving camera. That's just a joke for you people. These are the jokes, people. These are the jokes. So it's kind of strange coming from that point of view of modern audiences, knowing that Hitchcock is the master, to read a book where he's like, I have to defend why I feel that he is a master. And so it kind of, like, the beginning part, it's a little like, okay, yeah, you're preaching to the choir, buddy. Let's move along. And it happens quite a bit in the books. But as far as Hitchcock himself, very candid, very dry. I gotta say, I've watched extra features on this. I've watched extra features on other stuff. I know some stuff about Alfred Hitchcock going into it. So some of the stories he tells are already known. The early stuff, when he's talking about back in Britain, the silent days and doing the stuff, that's just an interesting look at how movies were made back then and how just the world was pre-World War II. Little bug, get out of here, bud. Go find some place to be. Don't be munching on my Hitchcock book. Bugs. What was I talking about? I was talking about Hitchcock and Truffaut. So it's kind of it's interesting. No, it's not interesting. So there's a little bit of a boredom there if you're a big Hitchcock fan and you've watched Hitchcock things, and he's like, this is how I did. He's a little bit of the magician pulling back the veil to show you how the secrets were done. I was watching all this stuff, watching it on Blu-ray, the picture quality. I'm going to go out there and say not as good as a film print can be, but better than some. Definitely better than VHS, which we would have watched. But he's like, this is how this was done. Did you see when the plane crashed into the water, splashed through the screen? He was very happy to tell how things were done. I'm just boom, 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 boom. Very happy to tell how things were done. I put a light in the milk. But he definitely has a glee for filmmaking, about figuring out how to do something, how to do tricks, why he does it, everything. He's a meticulous storyboarder. Some of the storyboards are in here. Let's see if I can find it. And some of the stuff, he's like trying to be shocking. And it's one of the things that he kind of goes into about Vertigo. If you haven't seen that movie, it's basically about Jimmy Stewart as a detective who has vertigo, and there's this girl that he meets who he is married to he meets this girl who is, I'm not going to ruin any of the plot of the movie for you. No, I am going to ruin the plot of the movie for you because I can't explain it without revealing the plot of revealing the plot of the. I can't talk about the movie without revealing the plot, but I can try and not tell you what the twists are, if there are any, in it. Vertigo. Jimmy Stewart is a director. Is a detective who has vertigo, and he gets hired by this old college buddy or something like that to follow his wife because she's acting weird, and she's going into this whole thing where she's thinks she's reincarnated so-and-so for this lady in this painting, and she tries to commit suicide, but Jimmy saves her and falls in love with her basically. But then they go to this one place, and she goes up a tower to throw herself off, and he tries to chase after her, but he gets the vertigo, and he can't make it up. Oh, it's right there. It's the vertigo. That's like, do you know how we did that? Which is basically zooming while panning, which basically you move the camera and the zoom lens, whatever opposite direction. Is that right? It's been too long since I've done it. So it causes everything to go, whoa, give you that vertigo feel. And then she throws herself off the building, or he sees the body fly down past her. And then he runs into a girl that looks amazingly a lot like her, and then proceeds to spend the rest of the movie making her into the image of her old self. So that's meets that girl and turns her into that girl. And as soon as she comes out of the bathroom with her hair done up as the other girl used to do it, then he looks exactly like how she used to be. It's like, to me, she's finally taken her knickers off. Suggestively, she's fully clothed at this time. Most of what Hitchcock does and talks about is, trying to convey sex without having to talk about sex or show sex. And then he proceeds to make love to her, and this is the 40s, 50s, 60s version of make love, which is basically kissing or holding your faces close to each other and telling and, saying how much you care for someone. That was the definition of making love in pre-1980. I don't know. Before the 80s, anyway, that was the definition of making love. And so, therefore, it was a form of necromancy. Which, questionable thing. Some people will go on about the questionable relationship that Hitchcock had with women, about how his platinum blondes that he seems mostly attracted to. I think that's which, Alma, his wife, the only woman he ever slept with, according to him, was not a platinum blonde. And I think it was more of that his ideal of what a sexy woman was. And I think a lot of people at that time would also think that is what a sexy woman is, and that is why, Marilyn Monroe, she was a sexy platinum blonde, but she was so popular was because that was the ideal of what an attractive woman is supposed to be, I guess. And so he was instrumental in probably in reinforcing that idea, because most of his women are platinum blondes, very cool, almost cold, most of them. But it goes, from anywhere from Saboteur to Psycho. And he had a lot of great actresses. Janet Leigh, Kim Novak, Tippi Hedren. I'm blanking on the big one from Doris Day. What's her name? Ingrid Bergman. And there was the one who became princess. I'm reading the book in front of you. What is better than watching somebody read a book or sing a song about how... I don't remember who was in Dial M for Murder. Oh, it's in the back here. And then even Julie Andrews, and it got to that point. Grace Kelly, that's who I was thinking of. That's who's the big person going through. And the book's got a lot of great photos, several of them showing the editing, or trying to convey the editing of the movies. Here's the famous shower scene, which I think people know, even if they don't know the movie, they know that of Hitchcock. Sorry, oh yeah. So, and there's some of the storyboards. He was a heavy storyboarder. They got some of those in there, and they got some great photos of the movies, especially if you're a big fan of Hitchcock. That's a book. That's the end of the video. Why am I saying the end of the video now? But he did obviously have some... He is a man of his generation. So there's nothing overly racist or sexist in the book, in the discussion. But he's obviously a man who doesn't really care about people's feelings. He would probably not be one of those people who cared about being politically correct, which makes it sound like he's a bad guy, kind of. I mean, it's 2022, and we're all just tired of people being jerks to each other. But on the same hand, not everybody has to care about everybody, do they? Just don't be jerks to each other. That's easy enough, isn't it? Shouldn't that be easy enough? But Hitchcock cared about one thing, and that was the movie he was making. He didn't care about actors' feelings, any of the other people in the production of the movie. Nothing in this book conveys that, so I don't believe that he was the kind of director who was overly mean towards the people that he worked with. He was just like, this is what I want. You need to give it to me. If you don't, then I have very little need for you. Because he planned everything ahead. He worked... Pre-production for him lasted longer than production. Probably post-production also. Because he wanted to get it all mapped out, figured out, and they talk heavily about this in the book. And he was the kind of guy who came up with physical film, which unfortunately I don't have any physical film with me, but physical film is on, I'm just going to say like 1-inch frame, and there were 24 frames per second was what they figured out timing to make the motion look realistic in a moving picture. Right? So basically a foot of film is 1 second of a movie. And this Hitchcock was the kind of guy who'd be like, okay, well, I need like 6 feet of this shot. I need 3 feet of this insert shot here. This shot needs to be, at least 25 feet of film or whatever. That's really quick cutting there. Here's it's some fake blood coming in here, folks. Scene, and a spoiler for the movie Psycho. I just did it. You don't know. You don't commit that last few video frames to memory, because this is, if you ever haven't seen Psycho, watch Psycho, then come back and watch this video. Did any of you do that? He's telling you where you can put the comments. Let him know. He'd be kind of like guy who was like, okay, we need this needs to be a 30-second shot. This needs to be, 15 seconds. We need here, kind of thing. And he would be able to tell you in feet. And he loved figuring things out, and that shows in the book how meticulous his mind was, and how he did what he did. And you listen. I haven't done a lot of film stuff. I haven't been on a lot of professional sets. I've done some extra work. Last thing I worked on, the poor female director it was a TV show. She was British and she was in America, and the crew, it's not like they were necessarily mean, but they were she was kind of like, this is what I want. And the crews were kind of like, oh, well, you don't want that. You want this. No, this is what we need to do, kind of thing. And it was just, that's kind of what Hitchcock never would have put up for. He would have said, nope, see ya. He broke lifelong friendships. They talk about Bernard, whoever the music composer was. I gotta go to the booklet of the thing here real quick. Boop, boop, doop. It's gonna tell me in 5, 4, 3, 2. It's all about the movies. Bernard Herrmann, and then just one show, just one movie. I think it was Torn Curtain. He did the score for it, and Hitchcock asked for a jazz pop influenced score, and Herrmann refused to make the changes, and the two never worked again. And there's little remorse about this, and they made 9 Hitchcock films. It's just matter of fact for him. It's not, he's not a sociopath. He just, it's just is what it is, and that's what it is, kind of thing. But interestingly enough, Herrmann did continue to score the François Truffaut Fahrenheit 451 and Taxi Driver. Who doesn't love Taxi Driver? One thing that he talks a lot about is the MacGuffin. And I hear people talk about the MacGuffin a lot, like they know, but they're not really using it right. But the MacGuffin is an inconsequential, it doesn't matter what it is. But in the movie, it is the great interest of the film's protagonist or the antagonist. It's what is driving the movie, but it doesn't necessarily matter what it is. It could be an object, a device, but a MacGuffin is an object, a device that drives the plot, usually at the beginning of the story, but can easily be forgotten once it's served its purpose. It's a MacGuffin. So great examples of MacGuffin are the microfilm from North by Northwest, the wedding ring and rear window, and the stolen cash envelope in, it's 11 o'clock. Stolen cat. Let me turn my alarm off, and then I'll continue what I'm saying. The greatest example of a MacGuffin is the stolen cash of in Psycho, because that's what drives the main plot. That's what gets the woman out of town, gets her on this rainy highway, and then gets her to stop at the Bates Motel. But in the end, that's not what the movie's about. Gets tossed aside the moment we're like, holy cow, there's a psycho here. Let's deal with Mr. Norman Bates. And I think he talks about every MacGuffin that is in each of his movies. Like I said, he is a man of his time, so they both are. So there are some discussions that happen in, mainly talking about the main protagonist in Marnie, which used to be, it was like one of my, it's like, oh, Marnie's great. It's got Sean Connery and Tippi Hedren's back in it, kind of thing. And then that was back before I really dated and got serious with girls and got married, and my understanding of what a relationship is with a woman. And in this, it leans heavily on that movie. There's a scene between Sean Connery and Tippi Hedren. They get married. They go on their honeymoon. And she has a psychosis about sex. basically Connery ends up, unfortunately, forcing himself on her. They don't really necessarily show anything, but that is obviously what happens. She doesn't want to do it, and he does, which is a sad fact of what marriages were like, probably are still like at this point in time. Should it be glorified in a movie? Probably not. Should it be Sean Connery doing it? It's been a long time since I've watched the James Bond movies, so it's kind of questionable on like how many women he talked into having relations with. But when Hitchcock and Truffaut talk about it, they're just like, oh yes, that's an interesting scene. So it's kind of unfortunate. It's definitely a trigger warning for anybody who has been a sexual assault victim. I would not recommend the movie Marnie or the that where they talk about him in the book, because it's just all very matter-of-factly and not at all anything about just kind of how creepy that is. I'm a 80s kid post Back to the Future. If somebody's messing around with a woman and it's, hey man, get your damn hands off her kind of attitude. But it was still definitely in that time period where it was, women were still considered, I'm not going to go say as far as property of the man. It had progressed past that part, but it was definitely a male-centric viewpoint. And it's sad that it's there, but it's there, and I commented on it, and that's it. Everything else, I mean, the movie Frenzy is about a serial rapist killer, and they don't talk about that really. They just talk about how to show that without showing that, even though the rape scene in Frenzy is very disturbing. So it's a good litmus test for any of your male friends to be like, hey, how about that one scene in Frenzy, huh? And then to steer clear of them and make sure all your female friends also steer clear from them. But I still stand by my assertion that Hitchcock is a master of movie making, regardless of anything else. He makes great movies. You're on Marnie's side. I was on Marnie's side through the whole time, and then that was sort of compounded trauma that she had to go through, and it kind of leaves the question up of whether that's something at the end that they can move on from. But I think the assumption was, when it was made and when this interview took place, was that you sure can. I feel like I've talked way too much about that. They do go into a couple of things in this book of Hitchcockisms. I feel there's some retro, whatever they call that, when they later fix, when you're watching a movie series and then a prequel comes out and it has nothing to do with what's going on in the movie, and so they do a TV show, or with the original series movies, and then they do a TV show that retro explains the chronology of the two, and be like, oh well, that's why this happened in the first movies and this didn't happen in the prequels. It's kind of like that. And the one that pops to mind, the Hitchcock phrase, all actors are cattle, which actors, of course, took offensive, because it was kind of like, actors, you just shove them wherever you want, tell them where to go, just like cattle. You just got to move them around and have them say their lines when you want to. I think that was the perception. What he says in the book was, he was kind of like, I don't really remember saying that, but if I did say it, I think I was referring to the fact with the British actors, a very set schedule. Anybody out there ever watched the Aliens documentary or a making of feature about aliens, and James Cameron being so frustrated with the British system of filmmaking, which is basically they have to stop at tea time, they have to stop at lunchtime, and it was like, ringing a bell and the cows come in kind of thing. So it's like same thing. It's like actor, say, hey, lunchtime, and the actors go and eat, rather than doing, no matter what you're doing. I think that's what he's trying to say in this book. I don't know which version is true. On a whole, I really enjoyed the book. It was very interesting. The thing that I found most interesting is actually at the end of the book. There's a random Hitchcock picture of Hitchcock in drag. Is that, people still call it that? I don't know. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not hanging out in the right circles to know proper terminology nowadays. Okay, so at the end of the book, there is a trying to get to the right page. The films of Alfred Hitchcock, starting from 1922's Number 13 Unfinished, where he did scenarios, basically. I think their first one that he has commented on was The Pleasure Garden, was his first, that he considered his first film in 1925. The Pleasure Garden. Okay, so it's got this list, all of them. And basically the thing that surprised me most is that it tells you the production company that released it, right? So I've got this, Alfred Hitchcock, Universal Pictures, Psycho, and Rope, and all these other Saboteur, like I said, 15, so there, classics. And in this, I think the only one that I knew that wasn't a Universal film was North by Northwest. But the thing that shot to me here was that, you look here, right here, if it focuses in, but it says Paramount. And you look at the poster, and it says Paramount. And I was like, that wasn't a Universal film? And so it's kind of like Vertigo is not, like, it's a Paramount film. And I've been interested in Hitchcock movies since early 90s, we'll say. Late 80s, early 90s. And so I got the VHS tapes, and they were always like this, the Universal Master Collection. And it was always his films, and I just always associated them with being Universal. But basically everything past Birds. The Birds is a Universal picture. You can almost say once you went full Universal, you start going downhill. But it was really not, and he talks about it too, about how difficult it is for him to direct. I'm digressing. It doesn't matter. Here we go. Difficult it is to direct the new people. Paul Newman, he had a real hard time with Paul Newman. And you're like, well, Paul Newman's a great actor. But he was part of this realistic acting style, that was starting in the 70s and created gritty 70s movies. Marlon Brando, I can't think of, but method actors. He was one of those. Hitchcock was like, well, I don't really care about that. I want you to say your lines at this part, and it has to last, so many seconds, and then you're going to look this way and do that for so many seconds because that's what I need for the shot. So Hitchcock was completely technical, and the actors like Julie Andrews and Paul Newman were coming out from a completely different type of technical technique, and so it just butted heads, didn't work out, didn't do very good. So while I like the movies taking place that he made after The Birds, I'd say The Birds is his last best movie. And it kind of shows in the book where he's starting to just get frustrated. All of his favorite he lost Grace Kelly to marriage. She became married the Prince of Morocco. He's telling you where to comment. And a lot of the older actors that he loved to use, like Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant, were getting a little on the older side and didn't feel they were getting to retirement age, and they were feeling not the urge to be acting anymore. And Hitchcock was very wanting controlled sets. A lot of his movies are rear projection, people driving in a car with the video image behind him or whatever, just so he could get the dialogue and the lighting and the shot perfect. And in the 70s, it was all real, man. It was all on the streets, guerrilla type filmmaking. And it was like, we gotta, Peckinpah and Scorsese and William Friedkin. So if Hitchcock made a film in his style, people would feel like, oh, that's the old style. That's so passé, we're not watching it. Which is unfortunate. There are some scenes in Torn Curtain, especially the murder scene, that stand out. But it was not a time that was congruent with good Hitchcock movies. That's just the way it was. And then it talks about how his health dropped dramatically after, I think even during the making of Family Plot, which was his last movie. And there were more projects that he didn't make than did make. Another interesting thing about the book are the parts where he talks about movies that he wanted to make, but it, for whatever reason, didn't happen. Like there was going to be a Titanic movie, was supposed to be his first movie in America about the sinking of Titanic. I have no idea if that would have been a great movie or not. It sounds like a great movie. Kind of like James Cameron directing a movie about the Titanic. That sounds like a good idea. But he did Rebecca instead, and we have that, which is also, I think, one of his best movies. So I feel like I jumped around a lot there. Hopefully all of my thoughts have become congruent. I'm probably not going to reshoot it if it doesn't. Because I never do, guys. Do I ever? I mean, sometimes I throw in some voice stuff in there over something. It's possible I might do that here. We'll see how bad I did. But it's a bit of a trick because you thought this was just a book review, but there is a video review also, a documentary about the Hitchcock-Truffaut book entitled Hitchcock-Truffaut, the greatest story Hitchcock ever told. It was the story of his life. And he's just like, kind of like, it's all right, I guess. This movie will thrill you and change the way you watch movies, says Matt Patches, Esquire. Esquire is the magazine name. It'd be funny if he was an Esquire. I'd find it funny. Like Bill S. Preston, Esquire. So yeah, somebody made a document about the impact this book had on film directors. So in 1962, Hitchcock and Truffaut locked themselves away in Hollywood for a week to excavate the secrets behind the mise en scène in cinema, based on the original recordings of this meeting used to produce the mythical book Hitchcock and Truffaut. It's like looking at I was going to say unicorn, but leprechaun jumped in my head, but I still managed to say unicorn and leprechaun. It's just all right there. I'm a little leprechaun. The mythical book. This book does not exist. You could not buy it for $12 on Amazon. Sorry, just a little teasing on the face. Mythical because of the lore of, because of the impact of it. Not that it's impossible to find or people don't believe it really exists. This film illustrates the greatest cinema lesson of all time and plummets us into the world of the creator of Psycho, The Birds, and Vertigo. Hitchcock's incredibly modern art is elucidated. I didn't say that right. Elucidated. I can't do it. And explained by today's leading filmmakers, Martin Scorsese, David Fincher, Arnon Desplechin, I'm going to mispronounce everybody's name, I don't know who they are beforehand, Kiyoshi Kurosawa, Wes Anderson, James Gray, Oliver Assayas, Richard Linklater, Peter Bogdanovich, and Paul Schrader. Is that all the people? Yep. I see them all in the front there. They got them all right there. So you can read for yourself. And this is a documentary about basically how people, and these are, film directors, the show David Fincher, Martin Scorsese, and Wes Anderson there. Great filmmakers of today talking about pre-internet information. How did you find out about Hitchcock movies? Anybody who's a director of their caliber should be able to see a Hitchcock movie and understand that they're watching a great movie. I mean, you can be a director of my caliber and understand that you're watching a great movie. You don't have to be their caliber. It can range. Them, me, there. It's an interesting look about how much impact that this had in a pre-internet time. There was no, in a pre-video time. If you were lucky, there would be a revival of one of his movies. Maybe they would show it on TV, but if they did, it would be butchered. Edited for television. And it's just one of those things where I think at this time, go to Amazon and see, 5 or 6 people talking about this book, there's probably hundreds of videos of people talking about Alfred Hitchcock movies. There should be. Anyway, and they're going to be range from good to bad. I mean, not good to bad. Well, quality-wise for them, not necessarily better than this one. Worse than this one. But, whether they think he's a good director or whether he thinks he's a bad director. All this information is pretty much on our fingertips. If you don't want to buy the physical copy, I would bet you a donut that you can get a digital copy of it, download it on your phone, and read it whenever you wanted. And this was talking about the days when that wasn't true. You had to get the revised, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm so burpy. The revised edition, 38, 39, 40. So this is the 38th printing of it, translated into English 1984. So the revised edition, since 1984, you had to get the physical copy of it from a bookstore who happened to be holding this. And I don't know how popular this book was. Of course, everybody they talked to, I was going to let it say cock there on the side. Truffaut. Everybody that they interviewed here obviously got their hands on it. But it was pretty much a film Bible talking about movies, having you think about these movies. I mean, you've been able to see, you can watch them, and there's something there, but you can't quite grasp what it is about you are watching that makes it something amazing to you. And this book here breaks it down. I don't know if I said that before, but it breaks it down and tells you what the thought process was about it and what went behind it. Sorry. One other thing about this book that I didn't like was that Hitchcock was very dismissive of the films that he felt were a failure. So basically, one of the reasons that Hitchcock had an office at Universal Studios. That's why the Psycho House is on the ride, if they still have that. And he owned most of his movies, if not all, a lot of them. He produced and owned a lot of his movies, and he gave the reason that they're on this this is a Universal collection instead of a Paramount collection was because these were the ones that he felt were his best work, and that's why he put them on there. And the other stuff under Capricorn or the Paradigm Case, it didn't go the way he wanted it to, mostly due to casting. He feels that he didn't get the right cast for the parts, or directing. Not directing. No, it just had things about it, or it didn't do very well in the box office. And this was even before the time where everyone was like, oh, what's the opening weekend box office? Oh, it didn't triple its budget in the opening weekend? Well, then It's a horrible movie. No one should ever watch it. That's the attitude of the last 5 years that I am sick of. I don't agree with. Because movies are great. A lot of people go see movies in the theater. Lots of different reasons. It's raining that day. It's 100 degrees out. And even though sitting in a nice, cool movie theater sounds like a good idea, getting in the car and driving there does not. Sorry, back to this. It really is a fascinating look at how important this movie was to directors that at least I admire, that I don't know if you admire, but you're probably aware of, at least. And it is universal. Boom, ba-doom. And then it's just, a little fire. Hey, if you like a documentary about a book from the 60s, how about these movies from the 60s and 40s, 30s? I've only seen 2 of these movies. I have not seen To Kill a Mockingbird. I, of course, have seen Psycho. It's right here. Spartacus, I've never seen. Pillow Talk, I've never seen. Frankenstein, I've seen it. Come back in October, and you'll see what I think about it. Charade, I've never seen. Double Indemnity, I've never seen. And Harvey, I've never seen. It's kind of funny because when I was a kid growing up, Harvey was always the first thing anyone talked about when it was talking about Jimmy Stewart. It was like It's a Wonderful Life and Harvey. Guy whose best friend is an imaginary giant rabbit? You're trying to tell me he's in a great movie with a single shot? Rope. It's a very nicely made documentary about it. If you can find it, go check it out. The Blu-ray comes with bonus features, a Q&A with Kent Jones and Noah Baumbach, written by and directed writer, director, producer, editor. With them, an appreciation for Notorious, just basically everybody talking about the movie Notorious. Rope, pro and con, people who like the movie Rope, people who don't like the movie Rope. If you don't know what the movie Rope is, it's about 2 New York upper crust kind of intellectuals who kill somebody and then have a dinner party while they're in the chest where the food's laid out on, and Jimmy Stewart's in it, and he basically figures out that these 2 killed somebody and are having a dinner party. It's all a big joke and game to them and tears them down. Richard Linklater talks about Truffaut, which I don't think I've ever seen a Truffaut movie, actually. Not even Fahrenheit 451, 458, 451, or 525. Sorry. Sometimes numbers are just numbers to me. Peter Bogdanovich remembers Hitchcock. So the only one at this time, I think he has passed away, I could be wrong, who was in the vicinity of Hitchcock when he was in his late years. So there you go. Book review, movie review. If you... rewind. The only special feature I wish they had on here was the actual audio tapes of the conversation, because basically you would have Truffaut speaking in French, the interpreter talking to Hitchcock would respond, and the interpreter would go, and because Truffaut spoke French, Hitchcock spoke English, and so there was an in-between person, and they recorded it on tape. The tapes are still valid, still accessible. A lot of several of his movies on here and a couple of his other movies have excerpts of the audio conversation. It would have been nice if the whole audio conversation was also on this. That's my only qualm about this. It would have been cool if it was all in one place, or if they took it, just do another little thing where you have the whole conversation and then you put in the clips of the movies, run the video of the movies or photos of them or whatever through the whole talking about. That's something I would buy. I mean, I bought this on Blu-ray, and I'm glad I did. It was kind of one of those things where I was like, what? Somebody made a documentary about this? I'm reading that book right now. What an interesting idea. I am going to get it and watch it, and it was worth it. I would say give it a go. If you can find it someplace to watch, I would watch it. Am I going to find out where to find those movies for you to watch? No, because I'm a physical media channel, and I've got the physical media. Okay, if I know, I'll put it above the book. Okay, so that's the book review. Hopefully coming out August 13th. Mr. Hitchcock's birthday, Sir Hitchcock's birthday. And that concludes the book review. Bum, 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 bum. All right, thanks. See you next time.